Welcome to the Inspiring Heights podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Kaiser, and I am so excited to be here with you today. Inspiring Heights exists to walk alongside you as we learn to create healthy rhythms, flourish in our faith, and be inspired where our feet are. We're honored that you're with us today. We can't wait. Let's get started. Welcome back to part 2 of our routine series. In part 1, we talked about creating morning routines. I'll pause right quick and say, if you haven't listened to episode 25 on morning routines, now is a great time to hop back and take a quick listen. In today's episode, we're going to dive into the other bookend of our days, the evening time. The routines we set for our nights really play 2 major purposes. 1, they help us to wind down from the day, and 2, they set us up for the next morning. I will tell you in true honesty, for some reason, evening routines are so much harder for me to stick to than morning routines. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I have a few ideas that I'll point out as we go through the show, but part of it is that I think that I feel fresher in the morning and I'm motivated by the day in front of me. What I'm seeing, though, is that the decisions that I'm making in the evening legit impact my morning, which then, by extension, have bearing on the entire rest of the day. I say that for both you and me. If you were anything like me, you might be tempted to dismiss evening routines or at least consider them to be less important. But together, let's say they are different, but equally as important as the morning time. With that in our minds, we begin with what our evening routines are looking like right now. We talked about this in the morning time as well, but in order for this exercise to truly be helpful, we have to have an honest conversation about what nighttime looks like, not yet bringing into the list what we want it to look like. And if you're anything like me, your evening might not be as rhythmic as you want it to be, which can make answering the following questions a little bit harder. My encouragement is to just be really transparent with yourself, write everything down, and then we can make the decisions from there. Here's some questions to consider. When does my evening routine start? For some of us, it may be that our evening routine could begin immediately upon our return home, or when supper begins and it lasts all night. For others, it could be just right before bed. If you're thinking, I don't know if I actually have an evening routine, I would tell you, you do. You do. We all go to bed at some point. Most of us change out of the clothes that we wore outside that day into our pajamas. A few of us brush our teeth, read a book, take the dogs out for one final pit stop. There are these things that we typically all do before turning in for the night. We just have to identify what those are for ourselves. Second question. What do my evening routines consist of right now? And if you are someone who is wrestling with whether you actually have an evening routine, here is where you'll list all the things that you would do in a typical evening. And can I give you a big dose of encouragement here? Sometimes we may be tempted to leave things off that we wish we didn't do, like watch TV or scroll on our phones or have a giant bowl of chocolate ice cream. Here's the thing though, leaving those things off, that doesn't mean they don't happen. It just means we aren't acknowledging them. And by not acknowledging them, we have no real way of figuring out what the right balance is for ourselves. Maybe some portion of those things does fit into our evening routine, but maybe not for hours on end. We all have them, sis, so you don't have to pretend. We can lean in and walk through it and determine what healthy rhythms look like for our season. Final question. How do I prep for bed? This aligns with what your evening routine consists of, but drills down into the more specific part of the evening, bedtime. Bedtime is a marker of the very, very end of our days. Sometimes identifying all of our evening routines at once can be overwhelming, and we miss little pieces. So getting into the specifics of this time in our day will ensure that we capture all the components of our evening routines. Once we know what we're doing, it's time to consider the things that we want to get done. This is different than actually mapping out our evening routine. In this step, we are only identifying those tasks we feel like need to happen at night. And while we're at it, It's helpful to consider how long each of them will take. You don't have to hold back here as you think through these things. It is so easy to get more on this list than there is time for in the evening, and that is okay. We are going to deal with that in the next step. This is really a brain dump only zone. As I think through the evening, things that I want to have happen are things like dinner with my husband, 30 to 60 minutes depending on prep time. Clean up the kitchen, 10 to 20 minutes depending on what we cooked for dinner. Shower/end of day hygiene care, 20 minutes. Read, 25 minutes. Preparation for tomorrow, 10 minutes. 15-minute clean, 15 minutes. Answering this question can actually be a little bit of fun. I think sometimes I will say it, at least I know, I can build up all the things that I want to get done in any block of time as wildly unachievable. That's when we tend to throw in the towel, settle down on the couch for another episode of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. Getting our desired to-do list on paper with times attached helps us to know there is probably some reasonableness to achieving at least part of those things. This next step is like mapping out a floating routine. I say that because part of what becomes challenging to rhythmically move through our evenings is that specific time of day has different components all the time. Monday night football, Wednesday night church, Thursday date night, Friday supper with friends. We could move through a week where there are only 1 to 2 days where we get to do our full evening routine. So as you consider in your season what nights will typically look like, what items on the list you just made are what I call mission critical, meaning they have to happen no matter what else happens that evening. Then consider how many nights a week will you generally be doing a mission critical evening routine in your season. This is one area where we're all going to be different. People who have multiple evening commitments outside the home might be looking at the bare minimum approach several nights a week, whereas others who are generally home at night might only be looking at that approach a few times a month. I like to start with mission critical because it quickly helps us to determine our most important tasks on the list. Before we decide what else we're going to slip into our night routine, we need to ask ourselves the question we always ask. What is the most important thing about my evening? Here and again is another place where implementing evening routines gets tricky. My answer to this question isn't the same every night. Some nights, after an incredibly long day, what matters the most to me is unwinding so that I can be my best self tomorrow. Other nights, there are really specific tasks that feel like they're the most important to me. Getting the budget done, working on the podcast, putting laundry away. But I've had to learn to zoom out to more than moment-by-moment nighttime to-do list. So the most important thing for me is connecting with my husband. All the cleanup, the reading, the preparation for tomorrow's stuff drives connection. And here's how. I know if I wake up to a dirty kitchen, I'm going to be grumpy. I hate a dirty kitchen in the morning. It drives me bananas. Grumpiness breaks connection. If I don't prep for tomorrow tonight, I will be panicked in the morning. Panic breaks connection. If I don't read before bed, I don't sleep well. Lack of sleep equals grogginess. Grogginess breaks connection. So for me, when I think of my evenings, it's considering what's happening that night, but also what's coming in the near future, i.e. morning. So before we land the plane of mapping out our evening routine, ask yourself, what is the most important thing to me regarding my evening routine? Once we know what's most important and approximately how often we will be in mission critical mode, it's time to draw the map. Let's begin by considering how much from our wish list is reasonable. The best way to do this is to look at the time that we have and the time that those tasks take, prioritize based on what's most important, weed out any shoulds that don't actually move our most important forward. And then from there, we have a solid platform for building our evening routine. It seems to me that we can sometimes get in our head that in order for our routines to be rhythmic, the exact same thing must happen every single day. In certain areas, I can totally align with this way of thinking. For example, right before bed every night, I turn on my Hatch alarm clock. If you haven't heard of Hatch, they're amazing. I will link them in the show notes. It has certain lighting that I've set, and it plays this acoustic guitar music for about 25 minutes. And for 25 minutes, I read. I shut my brain off. I get lost in a book. And when that 25 minutes is over, the light turns off and it switches to rain. Consistency in this routine helps me sleep better. And over time, it has trained my body to wind down and prepare for rest. That light and that music almost creates this actual sensation in my body that's like, it's bedtime. That being said, there are other things that might happen in the evening, but are more of a weekly routine versus a daily routine. Feeding the sourdough starter, connecting with a friend or family member, taking the dogs on the walk, whatever that it might be. My point is, it is okay to choose things from your list that aren't going to happen every single day. It can be helpful and rhythmic to identify when and how often and what will trigger that event. Like feeding the sourdough always happens on a Friday night. The day of the week is the trigger. A chat with a friend happens once per week, and a text to set up that call is what triggers it to occur. The next thing is to implement. There's a quote that says, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And some people add things like, and get another cup of coffee. I don't mean to start the conversation about implementation off assuming failure. But friends, life happens and it happens fast. We all know that. If you have ever tried to implement something new, you know it can go good for a little bit and then someone gets sick, the dog needs to go to the groomer, work went long, Bible study got moved to an unexpected night, and so on and so forth. So when I'm trying to pivot a routine, I try my very best to go in open-handed, asking God for wisdom and strength to be both disciplined and open-minded to see when something just isn't working and I need to pivot. Being willing to step back and make some minor, or in some instances, major changes to our routines can help us move forward. An unwillingness to do that will probably just drive us back to where we were and kick us out of the car on a cold January day. So let's get to it with diligence and a humble heart. Friends, I want to take just a second to tell you what's been inspiring me lately. Last year, I took some podcast coaching from Jess Conley. She also has a certified coaching class that I haven't taken, but am super interested in. So therefore, I follow their business, Go and Tell Gals, very closely, and I will link them in the show notes. Jess is a great teacher and has written some amazing books. I've talked about her before, and she's just super fun to follow and listen to. One of the ladies who went through Jess's certified coaching class, her name is Lori Pointer, and she's also amazing, and I will link her webpage below. But she designed a planner called 5 and 2, based on the story in the Bible where Jesus feeds the masses with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, with food to spare. The idea is that bringing your 5 and 2 to Jesus and letting him show you abundance with that. Now, I have dabbled with the idea of getting this planner over the past several months, but I just had never quite made the leap. And when I was doing my New Year's planning between Christmas and New Year's, I decided it was time. This planner has questions like, what do I need to say no to this week? And what is my resounding yes? What is my 5 and 2? Who will I encourage? I use this planner more like a journal than a planner because golden coil, friends, golden coil. But this planner journal has given me some really good things to think on, meditate on, and pray on. And asking God what my 5 and 2 is, and then praying for him to multiply it in Jesus' name. It has been incredibly inspiring to dive into this really cool new tool. If you are feeling inspired and want to check it out, I will link that planner in the show notes. I would encourage you, friends, to take a second and consider what's been inspiring you this week. Friends, thank you so much for listening in today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you're so inclined, we would love for you to leave a review of the show wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps potential new listeners to get a feel for the show before they even hit play. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Inspiring Heights. If you haven't already, you can sign up for our newsletter, Inspiration from the Moment, by visiting our website, inspiringheights.org, and hovering over the Contact Us link. If you have friends that aren't yet subscribers, please share the podcast with them if you think it's something that would be helpful and inspiring to them. Okay, friends, until next time, take a deep breath and be inspired where your feet are. Bye for now.